All right, we're ready to roll.
I'd like to call to order the RTA Audit, Safety, Compliance, and Real Estate Committee. Teresa, roll call, please.
Mayor Kumar,
Here.
Ms. Welch, Ms. Elder,
Here.
Ms. Pachetti,
Here.
Mr. Sleesman,
Here.
and Mayor Weiss.
Here.
You have 5 committee members present. You have a quorum.
Excellent. Next item, we have approval of the August 20, 2024 minutes. Are there any comments from the committee members on those minutes? If not, I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Item number 3, the internal audit report, the presentation of the third quarter 2024 internal audit activities. And Tony Garofoli, Executive Director of Internal Audit, and his team will, as we've done the past few quarters, will present. And it's been a great dialogue. And Stephen and Tony, I really appreciate the new format. I had a chance to look at it yesterday, and I think that's serving the committee well.
Thank you, and good morning, Mayor Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, Ms. Birdsong-Terry, leadership team, and guests. For anyone on the streaming, my name is Anthony Garofoli, Executive Director of Internal Audit, and I will present with my team the third quarter internal audit activities. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize our newest certified internal auditor, Laura Crawshaw, to my right. Laura successfully passed the exam within the last month.
She's doing the whole presentation.
Yeah, she wrote it, so. Today's agenda. So we'll talk about the global audit standards, and we've been sharing this information for the past few quarters. This is a revision by the Institute of Internal Auditors, and we are required to implement these standards by January 9th, 2025. One of the components of those revisions or changes for us is modifications to the Internal Audit Charter. And for information today, we're still receiving feedback, from the Audit Committee, and we'll have an upcoming presentation to fully explain the changes and then ask for board approval at the next board meeting. We'll also today get into the Quality Assurance and Improvement Program, which is another significant component of the changes to the Institute of Internal Audit Global Audit Standards. We've done a lot of work this year to implement these standards, and we want to share a summary of that with the Audit Committee. To my right, Molly O'Donnell will present the railcar and infrastructure audit activities for the quarter. And for your information, both Laura to her right and Molly will be going to Sacramento next week to do the Buy America review for the 18 railcar option. And then I'll turn it over to Stephen Zimmerman to my left. He will lead us in the Internal Audit Quarterly Report third quarter activities. I said a few words about the charter, and now I'll turn it over to Stephen on the Quality Assurance and Improvement Program.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning, Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, General Manager India Birdsong-Terry, members of management. My name is Stephen Zimmerman, and I'm the Audit Manager in the Internal Audit Department. Today, I'm pleased to talk to you about our Quality Assurance and Improvement Program, which henceforth I'll refer to as the QAIP, as it's quite a mouthful. So the QAIP enables an evaluation of an internal audit activity's conformance with the global internal audit standards. And the program is meant to assess the efficiency and effectiveness of our activity and identifies opportunities for improvement. This is a graphic that is published by the Institute of Internal Auditors that is meant to give an overview of what a QAIP should look like and how it should be formed. So I'll just cover it very briefly. So it starts with quality built into the internal audit activity, and that's done through governance, such as this board, professional practice, which is our adherence to the standards and our implementation of those standards and our procedures and methodologies, and then the communication that takes place from the Internal Audit Department to the board and to senior management. Then there are activities that provide quality assurance over the internal audit activity. Those include ongoing monitoring, a periodic self-assessment, and a once every 5 years external assessment, which can also be performed as a self-assessment with independent validation, which we did a few years ago. These three activities that provide quality assurance over our work are meant to evolve into findings, observations, and recommendations, which we should be reporting out regularly with the Board of Trustees. Today we're going to talk about some changes we've made to our QAIP and some new implementations for our QAIP to set the tone for 2025. Now, this project started back in 2023 when I was part of the Public Management Academy class of 23 with Cleveland State University. It's a training program that the RTA offers to RTA employees. And my project at the time was I wanted to evaluate what our current QAIP implementation looked like, identify gaps to conformance, and develop a plan to improve and enhance what we have available. So that started by taking an inventory of the different elements of what a QAIP should consider and whether those elements were implemented or not. So in this table, it shows the different elements that a mature quality assurance and improvement plan should contain. That includes audit templates, which means that quality by design is built into all the methods and procedures that we execute as auditors. And we had that as an existing state. That's what our audit management system is built for. And we also have a robust review and quality assurance process to ensure the accuracy and due professional care in all of our work. However, we did identify some elements that we needed to implement. And these are mostly on the topic of ongoing monitoring. Things such as key performance indicators that can help us establish goals and track progress. Client satisfaction surveys, which can measure performance and obtain feedback from stakeholders. And post-audit lessons learned, which would be engagement-focused improvement, as well as an internal assessment framework, which would have department-focused improvement. Now, something we did have completed in 2023, which is really the most important element of a QAIP, is the once every 5 years external assessment. Again, we had that completed as part of the self-assessment with independent validation. And really that assessment validates for us and for the board and for management whether or not the internal audit activity conforms with the standards in its implementation. So when we had that assessment completed in 2023, we were found to be generally conforming with all elements of the internal audit standards at the time. Now we know that the standards are changing and there's some new elements. However, there are some opportunities for improvement, certainly when we did our self-assessment, and we knew that we had to make a more robust quality assurance and improvement program at the RTA. So I'm going to start by going through some of the different initiatives that we've been developing or implemented over the past year. And I'm going to start with our key performance indicators. So the purpose of KPIs are to identify the key measures of departmental objectives so that we can evaluate our performance. And when I was developing these objectives with feedback from the team, we wanted to make objectives that were specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, what we're going to ask from the board is we're presenting these proposed KPIs for the year 2025, and we'd like to receive feedback and also request approval of these KPIs at the February 2025 board meeting along the same time that we approve the internal audit plan. I want to spend a little bit of time going through the different KPIs that we identified, both through research into best practices, what other audit shops are doing, and some trainings that I attended. We've broken these KPIs out into 4 different sections. The first is audit delivery and efficiency, then staff development, client relations, and finally issue tracking and follow-up. So under the topic of audit delivery and efficiency, we have 3 different areas that we want to track. The first is our progress on delivering the internal audit plan with a measure of audits completed over audits planned. And I should also mention that there's a little asterisk at the footer of this table. When we look at quarters for our key performance indicators, we intend for those quarters to align with the audit plan approval. So March, April, and May would be our first quarter, and so on and so forth, because that would align with our audit plan. So for audits completed over audits planned, the different targets would be 15% by the first quarter, 30% by the second quarter, 60% by the third quarter, and 90% by the fourth quarter. And there's a reason for this cadence. The first is that we expect that when we have a new audit plan and we have a lot of projects all starting at the same time, they're unlikely to be completed in exact quarter increments. It takes some time to build up progress on an audit, and as you go through your risk assessment, your field work, and your reporting, we're expecting to have a little bit of a lead time to get to completion on some of those early projects. And most of the projects that we would be completing early in the year would be carryovers from the prior year that we're wrapping up at the end of the fourth quarter. The other reason is we don't necessarily expect that we're going to do 100% of every single project on the plan, because the plan is meant to measure our best guess at how we can best allocate our resources and priorities across the organization. Over the course of the year, those priorities change. This year, for example, we did a mid-year retreat where we adjusted and modified our internal audit plan. So the goal at the time, or the thought was 90% would basically get us about as close as we would like to get to the target for the annual audit plan. If the board has other thoughts, I'd love to hear them. We're open to this metric, but that's what we proposed. The next one is audit scheduled adherence. So this is the percentage of audits that are greater than 30 days past the scheduled completion. This is really a measure of how well are we forecasting how long it takes for us to complete an audit. So our target is that less than 20% of our audits exceed 30 days past scheduled completion. The final metric under this area is audit report timeliness. The average days from end of field work until the report publish date. And usually there's a lot of activities that take place between the end of field work, including our final quality assurance review, drafting the report, scheduling the exit conference, obtaining management response. So we're targeting 60 days, less than 60 days from end of field work to final report being published. Under staff development, the first metric we have is training hours, which is the number of training hours dedicated per staff per year. And we oriented this around how many hours it would require for an auditor to maintain a certified internal auditor designation. So they're required to carry 40 hours of continual professional education credits to maintain your certification. So we'd like every auditor to get, in the first quarter 10, then 20, then 30, and finish with 40 by the end of the year. And the other metric for staff development is certifications achieved. It is our intent and goal to have every staff auditor or every member of our team with at least one certification. So that would be 8 FTEs. Under client relations, client satisfaction, the percentage of our clients that are satisfied with our audit services is measured by our client satisfaction surveys with a target of greater than 80%. And then finally, under issue tracking and follow-up, first is status updates. These are the updates that management gives to us while implementation is ongoing. The goal is to keep the average days since the last status update for all open audit issues to under 60 days. And this would require greater collaboration and coordination with the clients on a quarterly basis to try to keep that number down. Right now, some status updates are updated more frequently, while some, they might take a very long time for the implementation to be achieved, and then status updates might be less timely as a result. So we're going to try and keep it to under 60 days. And then finally, issue closure. The percentage of eligible issues closed, 100%. So what does that mean? So after a management personnel says that an issue has been fully implemented satisfactorily, it's our responsibility to go in and validate whether or not that issue was actually implemented and has satisfactory correction been achieved. So it's called closure. So we want to make sure that we're closing all of our open audit issues and don't leave them in a state of unchecked implementation. We don't require any feedback at this time. We will ask for feedback between now and February, but if any board members have any questions or want to provide feedback, I'm open to it.
Hello.
Hi.
Trustee Elder. I'm just curious, how did you go about setting the targets for each of these categories? Is that based on best practice? Is that based on how we've done in the past, to the extent we've looked at some of these different categories? Can you explain that?
So I think what drove most was a balance between what can be achieved and what is the desired end state. So something that, for example, 90%, I could put 100% up there, but I don't think we could achieve 100% every year, and I don't know if that's necessarily the goal. For 60 days, I think that would be considered a best practice in the industry of how quickly you should turn over a report from fieldwork to reporting. Similarly with status updates. So I think it is a combination of what's best practice, what's achievable, but also gives us stretch where we can improve.
Got it, okay. And then maybe just a comment, and I'll be thinking about this until the next time we meet, but as far as the target goal on the delivery of the audit plan at 90%, I just wonder if, which I completely understand, it's kind of a way I think that we're building in flexibility to account for the fact that we don't always meet our goal, every time or by the established deadline. But I wonder if we might consider maybe, having a more realistic, thinking about, what realistically we can achieve within the year, as opposed to just saying, oh, we're only, our goal is 90%. I think the goal should be 100%, but maybe it means adjusting what that 100% means within the year. Does that make sense?
I think that does, and we could adjust the audit plan and look at the hours that we allocate. However, I think that the logistics of saying by the end of February, we have to have completely cut off all work, and how are we utilizing our auditors as we're ramping all of our work down for the year and expecting some work to then have to ramp up in the new year, there's always going to be carryover.
Sure.
So I think if we did achieve 100%, we'd actually have less utilized auditors at that time, because most people would be finishing everything, going into exit conferences, not able to start risk assessment, not able to start field work, and just waiting for that new audit plan year to start. So I think knowing the logistics of how we schedule auditors, I'd rather have a more robust audit plan that we expect carryover from year to year, rather than hit a 100% when I can just reduce the hours and then leave auditors unutilized. That's the rationale, but.
No, understood.
Trustee Elder, I also like to add that our work programs are risk-based, and it's our responsibility to provide risk coverage and test those risks, and then collaborate with management. So another reason why it's a little difficult to give that 100% on a completion.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we provide that proper risk coverage. And then earlier we were talking about how do we develop some of these benchmarks. I want you to know that we're very active in the APTA Committee of Audit Professionals. It's our peer group. In fact, we just had a meeting last week, and we are sharing benchmarks and we're sharing best practices.
Nice. Okay, great. Thank you.
Just one reaction, and I don't need an answer necessarily today, but actually it's the first one, the delivering of the audit plan. So audits completed over audits planned. How does that work when we have audits that come in and out? We may not complete. I mean, we may intentionally push one back and add another one in the course of the year. So I assume that adjusts for that?
You want to answer that?
So on a quarterly basis, and certainly at our mid-year retreat, we're looking at risk factors. We're looking at management's completion of projects, other criteria and factors in terms of how we update and modify our audit plan. Recall that if we have a substantial change to our audit plan, we are required to come back to the board for approval. We did come back and give a communication to the board where we had some what I'll call non-substantial changes, so that we could defer some projects into 2025 and to complete the priority projects in 2024.
So the numbers would be adjusted for
Yes,
those
the numbers are adjusted.
in and out.
Yes.
I just had a quick question. Did you, when you were formulating these targets, did you take a look back at previous years where you would have landed if these KPIs had been in place?
I did, but I didn't want to. It was a balance between not wanting to set goals that were too easy.
Right.
So, to be honest, if we looked, for example, at audits planned versus audits completed versus audits planned, we probably didn't hit 90% in the last few years. But this year, we're actually doing very, very well, and I expect the metrics to be pretty good. And then moving forward, I think what will help is by having the metrics to measure performance with full staff, we'll also then be able to organize our efforts around achieving the objectives as measured. So they're both measurement and also targets. So, for example, if we felt strongly that we did want to have the audit plan completed at 100%, then we could adjust our efforts to try to get to that 100% completion. It's just the trade-offs with each decision. That's what makes challenging to narrow down exactly what you want. But there were some things that, for example, the training on staff hours. I mean, we pretty much always supply approximately 40 hours, but it's also the best goal, right? Because that's what our continuing professional education requirements match at. And then for days and status updates or closing issues, we have looked at how old the aging of status updates are and know that this is an area that we really need to spend a lot of time improving our communication and coordination with stakeholders. So that one's going to be a stretch goal. because some of the status updates do become a little outdated, mostly because if an implementation is going to take months, the stakeholder doesn't necessarily want to log in every week or 2 weeks and say, still working on it. So what does a useful update look like, maybe on a less frequent but still reasonable basis?
Trustee Sleesman, I'd like to add that this is one of the first times in, I'll say, a good 5 years that we've had a full staff. Okay, this is our full complement and per the budget, 8 FTEs, and we're blessed to have a full staff at this point.
Great, thanks.
Just a quick insertion point, if I may. So first, congratulations on providing this. This is really, it seems familiar as far as almost a scorecard, right, for the KPI. So really in line, whether that's intentional or not, I think it's striking that chord to make sure that we all are kind of working through the KPI. So the traction information that we put in front of the board every quarter, this really kind of harkens to that, I think. Just a couple of really quick questions. The certifications, are there any specific certifications that you are looking for amongst your team, Tony or Stephen? And then is it within budget, or is that a stretch goal itself to make sure that one per staff is achieved?
Well, Ms. Birdsong-Terry, it's our goal to be well-rounded, and there are a number of disciplines that go into, skill sets that go into being a good auditor. For example, we have Andrew Scott, our certified information systems auditor. Myself, I'm a certified fraud examiner. We have a number of certified internal auditors. So we certainly, a certified public accountant is another certification. So we want to be well-rounded, and as risk changes in not just our industry, but as we learn about it within the audit industry, we want to keep adapting, ourselves.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. As you go into it, and maybe if there's a baseline certification, that might be something to think about. I'm not sure, again, if that applies or everyone has a different kind of certification, but something to think about as well. And then the issue closure, I just wanted to make sure I understood. Does that include any kind of follow-up? So for example, we have a couple items. Would that be, the systems are in place, but then you come back after 6 months to make sure, is that included in that time period?
Certainly it does. The validation of the recommendations that we issue and where we agree with management on an implementation date, it is our goal and is our professional responsibility to validate and then close.
Okay. And then, sorry, just 2 other things. The KPIs, so I'm glad you mentioned APTA. I was thinking about that as well. Is there a baseline for the targets? I know that it can be an organic process when you're kind of figuring them out for the first time. How do we know if these are aggressive or if these are, how do we know, what's the comparatives for the targets? Is there any other examples that you have that maybe you could be able to show kind of how different auditing functions work? I know they're all different.
Yeah, there's a couple examples that I can share
Okay.
as a supplementary
Okay.
that'll appear similar to what we presented.
For size
today.
and scope and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay, that might be helpful, just to make sure that folks understand that, because the conversation about 100% versus 90, we have the same situation, the same conversations. We talk about PTAS, for example, on the safety and security side. Fatalities is one that we always say we'd love to be at 100, but or not 100, 0. But we want to also give ourselves a little bit of leeway for life. And so if we have one out of sheer happenstance, we mourn that loss, but we want to make sure that we try to strive for 0, which would be striving for 100 in this case. But I do agree with a little bit of realism where you've got to make sure that you can keep yourself accountable for what may happen.
What's in our control, is our focus. So, and it is organic.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Hearing no other comments, I'll proceed.
Oh, sorry. One last thing.
Oh, sure.
Client satisfaction. Can you explain that one and how you get to that? Is that the surveys?
Yeah, you know what? I think the next slide will
Is it coming up
perfectly segue into that. All right. Client. So client satisfaction surveys. So the purpose of these is to measure the client satisfaction from audits, to improve our internal processes, and to enhance client relationships. However, we do recognize the challenge when you've just finished an audit. Do you feel comfortable giving honest feedback to your auditors? So actually one of the things I'm going to ask from the management team today is sort of a friendly challenge we want your honest and critical feedback when we start, as we've been sending out and continue to send out these satisfaction surveys. Because without the feedback and without it being honest, if you just give us all fives, it's not going to help us grow and not going to help us be better auditors. So please, as you or your management team is filling out these surveys, we'd love to hear your honest feedback. So this next slide shows an example of what our client satisfaction survey looks like. We've been issuing these all throughout 2023. And it's a 10-question survey accessible through our audit management system. The first 7 questions measure things on the Likert scale between strongly disagree up through strongly agree. And they ask questions including things on, was there clear communication throughout the audit? Was the audit topic relevant to your needs and business objectives? Did we provide value throughout the engagement? Was the duration appropriately sized based on the complexity of the audit we were performing? Did we consider your stakeholder input as we go throughout the different phases of an audit? Did the auditor and the audit team act with professionalism? And then did they demonstrate integrity? And that integrity element is actually added, which we'll talk about recently, as part of the new standards. And then we also include some open-ended questions for people to write positive experiences as well as improvement opportunities for the audit, and then any open comments. So the calculation of satisfaction will be based off the result of these agree-disagree scores. So as long as a member of management is satisfied with the auditor based on their rating of these scores, that'll get plugged into the percentage that agree on the KPIs.
Quick question on this one. Who does this go to? I know I've seen the surveys, but who are they going to? Is it so if you're auditing a department for, I don't know, timekeeping or payroll or something like that, does it go directly to the kind of mid-level management that you're working with? Does it go to the director? Does it go to the DGM? What's the?
So usually we try to match the distribution list of the audit report, which would include at the lowest level maybe a subject matter expert who is a key player in the audit, the manager that's over the function, the director that's over the function, and then sometimes, not always, depending on how complex the audit, the DGM that was over the function. We can include DGMs in all cases if they'd like. I don't think we've always sent them to you. I think we've had some audits like the customer experience survey where you were involved in, and the traction audit where you were really closely involved in some of the recommendations. We sent that to you. If there's a standard format where you always want to get these or you always want the DGMs to receive them, we can implement that as well. But I'd say we are usually more conservative on including more people than less.
Yeah, my preference would be the former, right, to make sure that everybody is kind of included and you have a mixed bag of responses, because everyone always doesn't have the same opinion, and they shouldn't, right? So you want to have the subject matter experts really kind of have the most engagement with your team, and to make sure that we're getting their feedback, I think is important. So that's something I wanted to make sure we do. Is it after every audit? Okay.
Every audit, with the exception of maybe if we did a special request investigation. Like if it was like a fraud investigation, we probably would not send one out.
I would imagine so.
As a follow-up to that, Trustee Elder, will the ultimate results reflect those different levels in the results in each of those for DGM or subject matter experts, or will it just be like we'll lump them all together and then have results?
That's a good suggestion. I mean,
Because I would like to see the
we
breakdown.
could, for the purpose of the KPI, present them aggregate, but then also produce a separate analysis of results by craft, job responsibility, division. Yeah, we can slice and dice the data as many ways as long as we get a nice number of results.
Right. Because I'd imagine, to the point made earlier, that each level may have varying opinions or thoughts about how things are going. So I think that as a board, we would appreciate knowing that.
The primary use for these satisfaction surveys, certainly on the metrics, but after each project, we have an after audit debrief with the team. Check your titles at the door, and let's learn from ourselves. Let's learn from our clients, and then part of our quality improvement process. So it's really it's twofold again, the scoring, but more so to improve ourselves.
Yeah,
Which is also my next slide.
we're ahead of the game.
Quick question, how many of these surveys do you think there would be, like when you're looking at metrics, what would that the N be? What would the number of surveys that you're looking at? Because I'm worried about a number that's too low to actually learn much of anything or see any patterns.
Well, you have to imagine, Tony, off the top of your head, how many audits do you think we have on the audit plan? Like,
Probably have about 47, 48.
and then I'd imagine maybe an
Times-
average number of respondents would be 5 if everyone, 5 to 10, but maybe more on the 5. So
And there's survey fatigue, no question, Trustee Sleesman.
Yeah, and there's also, you need a certain number of surveys before you can actually learn anything from the metrics that come out of them.
Yeah. And generally, some of our clients want us out.
Yeah, yeah, which is that's going to end up being part of the problem, right? Like if there's not a big enough data set here, and there is a department or a certain either individual position, it's not even necessarily individual, but it could be a department or just someone who doesn't want you in their faces. You're going to get low numbers on a small sample set, and that might not actually reflect much of anything other than
There's always
circumstance.
something to learn from, not just the surveys, but our after
Right.
action briefing, which, just another tool in our toolbox.
yeah.
and I think something that standards espouse and something that we also take close to heart is, we try to build strong relationships with our clients, and you might not, it might be challenging sometimes to deal with the audit, but if at the end of the day you derived value from it and you felt that it was important and it improved your department, your processes, or your risk exposure, then even if you would have preferred to just go about your day, maybe if there was some value, you'd still have a positive experience at the end. And then if some clients feel that we're maybe having a lot of projects simultaneous, which I'll admit sometimes happens because we tend to audit on themes, and then that sometimes means that we have several concurrent projects, or maybe over many months are going back to the same department because we're following a particular risk theme. I mean, maybe that's honest feedback that we should try and break apart those audits over the course of a year and not hit them so hard so frequently. So for any audit clients out there that feel like we're in your shop a lot, we recognize that, and we're going to try and change that too to be a little more consistent.
Forgive me if I missed this, but is this a random sampling per department or?
No, it'd be every audit, every client on the distribution list as we've been.
A direct relationship with our audit plan.
I think since we have it's not like we don't have like thousands and thousands of clients where we want to take a random sample. We have such a small, really, bucket of eligible clients to pull from. It's got to be 100%, as Board Member Sleesman said, to get a good size of. So it's really not even sampling. It's just feedback across all the clients in the population.
And we don't require that they complete.
I don't currently have a mechanism to require them to complete. No.
It should be strongly encouraged.
Yeah, I think part of my goal was by coming out and having it be presented to the board today and a commitment to this in 2025, it would encourage more participation among our audit clients.
Thank you.
Yeah, it always makes it more useful, right? If there's more data, you can actually get an idea of what the numbers mean. The only other thing I would add is when you have survey data like this, it can be very powerful. However, the client filling it out is primed, so whatever the message or email says can affect how they answer, just because we're all human.
Sure.
If you put someone in a bad mood
Sure.
before they answer a survey, you're going to get a bad survey regardless of what they actually think about whatever the service or product is. So that's just kind of a think about that, and I think be deliberate in whatever that message is or however that priming is done.
We're aware, and it's also a good a test of the culture of the organization.
Yeah, thanks.
And then I don't want to completely make it sound like people don't want to fill out our surveys. I think a challenge we've acknowledged is that you have to sign into our audit management system to do the survey. So something we also want to pursue in 2025 with the help of information technology is to implement single sign-on for teammate. So that's one less hurdle. You don't have to remember what was my username, what was my password. You get the link, you can click it, and you can just start filling it out. And hopefully that will also help with participation.
Just a quick comment is, so yes, absolutely, and welcome to public service, right? I think your last experience is what you put out on the survey, we go through the same thing again with the NPS. So I'm thinking about NPS, right? Your Net Promoter Score. How likely is someone to say, "Hey, audit is a great resource, use it," versus, "Hey, I need this audit done," or you telling them that they need an audit done. That's something to think about as well if we want to think about just future, right? Not for right now, but do we want to insert that sort of NPS mentality into this type of feedback mechanism for audit, which would, I think, would be revolutionary. I don't know that anybody's doing that. But to be able to think about how often would you recommend. So for example, the fraud, you mentioned that, right? To me, that serves as almost a mechanism for NPS, because when someone says, "Hey, if you have an issue, call the fraud hotline," that goes straight to IA. So to me, that's a way of looking at that. Maybe, excuse me, something to think about is utilization of the tools, excuse me, that people have in there at their disposal that translate into providing your services. So how often do you feel comfortable with the tools that are there for you to report issues that may arise? Maybe think about some of the questions, and maybe not as a after action survey, but think about maybe an annual survey. I know that there's a survey that, Tony, you sent, I think, to the board, if I'm not mistaken, or management, to kind of say, how are we doing at some point? Maybe we think about having one of those touch points, not, all the time, but one with the internal staff and say, "Hey, how is IA doing?" And that's where you could get kind of creative. This is just thinking out loud with different questions to be able to get to the quality of service that I think you're asking for, to get away from, "Hey, I just got audited, I'm going to kind of mark you low," right? Because that just happens. It's the same thing if somebody hops on a bus and they don't have the best experience, they're kind of frustrated for that day. It doesn't mean that they don't feel the service isn't valuable. I think you get at those questions in 2 and 3. How will it help my business? How does the audit help run better? Again, I think back to the scorecard that we have with community impact, I think it is about perception of our service. So perception of audit. This might be a really good opportunity to think about how to educate people on the value of having an auditing team, and so that they understand that, hey, this is a tool to be able to help me get better and to refine my management tactics, so that people start to see you as an ally or continue to see you as an ally. That might be a way to kind of get them to understand it. So I think there's a lot of things that we could do with that if you're interested, to be able to have a 1-year touch point, excuse me, where you could maybe look at the year-over-year after effects and then start to see how these after-action surveys play into the overall annual kind of touch point and see if that has changed over time.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation, and there's actually an element that we'll talk about a little later, although it does not include that exact recommendation, which is an annual self-assessment, which is meant to bridge the gap between the external assessments. That'd be a great time to implement a survey like that to kind of get, okay, year end, the audit's not fresh, but generally as an accumulation of all the audits, whether you were a subject matter expert or a direct participant or just heard about it from someone else.
And make that one anonymous. And that would be maybe your IT portal that you were talking about, kind of how we do for the, I'm looking at George when I'm saying this, the employee surveys, where it's not really tied to who you are and what department you're part of, because sometimes you give a little bit more honest information that way when you're one of 2,000 reporting. I mean, you may not get that many in the beginning, but you get that kind of detail. So that's what my recommendation would be.
Thanks for the feedback.
I like that idea, and I actually think you'll get a lot of good information from the commentary portion of any survey like that you do. And it's a good comparison because you get we get 400 plus surveys from each mode when we go through the scorecard, and you're going to get 150 total or whatever. The bad days that someone has kind of wash out with, because someone else will have a good day when you have 1,200 answers every quarter, however often we do this, it'll kind of wash out, which is unfortunately for questions 1 through 7 on this, you guys aren't going to have a really big sample size. You'll only just be able to see some patterns, I think, developing. But those last 3, the more qualitative answers, I think will be really where you're going to be able to get some good stuff out of there.
Thank you.
The next one is our post-audit lessons learned reviews. These also we've started doing and have done for every audit in 2023. So the objective is to establish a norm of regrouping at the end of an audit to discuss the outcomes and to have honest, introspective feedback aimed at improving our internal processes, engagement by engagement. So this is the standard form that we use that captures the information from the meeting. It includes things such as what were our successful practices during the audit, what are some self-identified opportunities for improvement, challenges or limitations we might have faced, whether that was coordination, access to resources, field work that didn't go exactly as planned. What kind of recommendations do we have for follow-up timing? Is this something that we need to audit in another year, 2 years, or was the result very positive and we can maybe project it out of 5 years or more? And then additionally, were there other areas that we identified where we looked at this area, now we should consider auditing this topic? When we look at these successful practices, opportunities for improvement, it's not just meant to be, did the staff auditor that was assigned do the work correctly? It's did management design and support the auditor to have success? Was the planning memo, which guides our risk assessment, well documented and sufficient for them to execute their procedures? Was the field work written in a way that was easy to execute, easy to understand, and produce reproducible results and outcomes? So it's really a holistic view of the process. And we've had really good feedback and participation from the staff. So it's a norm at this point. We've been doing it for the entire year, and it feels kind of wrong at this point to end an audit and not complete it. And then we use this information for our annual audit planning. We'll use it in January and February. And then we've also used it at our mid-year retreat that was this year to look at how do we want to potentially modify the audit plan. All right, so the last element of the QIP that was missing is the internal assessment framework. So the internal assessment is meant to measure the department's compliance with the standards. However, the standards are changing. So the solution was the Institute of Internal Auditors developed a standards readiness assessment that was meant to measure the gap between if you were an audit department that was fully in compliance with the old standards and what else would need to be done to become compliant with the new standards. And as we knew, we had that external assessment completed and we were fully compliant, so this really was a good tool for us to use. This is just an example of what the tool looks like. So it identifies the different requirements in the standards, what the changes mean, considerations for a department to implement, and then examples of evidence of conformance. So we went through this tool and looked at every single new standard, evaluated against our own performance, and identified corrective action plans when required. So that was just for example. The readiness assessment results, there were 27 distinct standards identified by the IIA that would require evaluation. We were already in compliance with 16 of these updated standards. The reason for that is, as the standards transitioned to the new format, many shoulds became musts. Many things that were in best practices became codified in standards. We were already doing those best practices, so we were already in compliance with those elements. However, there were 11 standards where we would have to implement a change to achieve compliance. And we've developed 11 corrective action plans with 2 already complete, and I wanted to share that with the board. So this corrective action plan table, it's a couple slides, is broken down by the standard, the missing requirement and the action plan to correct it, and then a target date. So the first one under honesty and professional courage, the IIA actually explicitly requests that we have our client surveys include an assessment of auditor honesty and professional courage when we issue them, and we've added that to our template. The next, under the standard of competency, to maintain a central repository for tracking training, certifications, and continuing professional education credits, and to formalize our training program. So we obviously will need to start tracking the training hours if we're going to measure our KPIs. We kind of had a loose idea of how many training hours we were doing per year, and those of us with certifications were certainly tracking our own. We're now going to track them as an entire department together. And then we have a pretty robust training program, especially for new auditors, but it's all, basically in our heads. We need to write it down, formalize it, a part of succession planning, so that if Tony or I leave, someone else can take it along and continue the good training that we do. Next is under continuing professional development. Annual ethics training is now a requirement for all auditors. Previously, only a certified internal auditor had the requirement to have annual ethics training, and we did. But now, even a brand new staff auditor that just joined the team, such as Kylie, who joined us just this summer, has to have ethics training every year. And so we've implemented that already. We've integrated annual ethics training into our regular training program. And honestly, I'd say most years we probably were already getting annual ethics training, especially as the Ohio Ethics Commission would come through and give their training on an annual basis. The next is protection of information. So the new standards require that we develop discrete procedures to codify department standards for requesting, storing, accessing, and sharing confidential information. and to review and enhance, if needed, our annual statements of confidentiality. So we have standards for how we handle confidential information, but there's a lot of technology changes probably since the last time they were written down. So this is an opportunity to really codify with all the new technology that's available and the different mechanisms we have. We have a new audit management system, new Microsoft 365 tools, a new Outlook client, all these different elements that can enhance how we protect confidential information within our department. Next, under the Chief Audit Executive Qualifications, the standards require that the Executive Director of Internal Audit's job description and qualifications be updated regularly. Tony's been in the role for many years, so the job description has not been changed in quite some time, so they would like to have something that is updated and current, even if that person has been in the role for many, many years. They also identify that the Executive Director should have a succession plan in case they were unable to perform their duties. How would the Internal Audit Department continue? Under quality, they are now requiring the establishment of annual performance objectives that should be approved by the Board of Trustees. And as you saw, we have those performance objectives and we're requesting approval in February. Internal audit strategy, this is a new requirement that the Internal Audit Department develop a strategy that looks forward 3 to 5 years. So we have used strategy in developing our annual audit plan, but we don't have a written document that defines that strategy. So some examples of that would be, we know that the rail car procurement is going to take many years to see fruition, and we've structured our audit plan about providing assurance over those different evolution of those elements over time. Well, now we'll codify it in a written strategy, and among other things that we've been focusing on these last few years. Under human resources management, we should develop a formal recruitment and retention policy. And this is the last slide for corrective action plans. Communicating results, establish a process for communicating engagement themes at defined intervals. So we've already been auditing based on themes. We've actually got some sheets on our wall in our war room that define some of the themes that we've been focusing on this year, including customer experience, configuration management, and the rail car procurement, and information technology and governance. Now, the IIA is recommending if you audit many topics under a theme, you should be issuing a report that basically summarizes what the holistic result of all those individual engagements mean for the organization as it relates to that theme. So we also endeavor to do that in 2025. Performance measurement, so similar to the 8.3 element on quality, once our KPIs are approved by the board, we have to maintain active measurement of those performance objectives. And then finally, recommendations and action plans. We have an administrative procedure for management response to audit recommendations. It's fairly old, so it's time to review and update and make sure that it still meets the needs of the organization and the Internal Audit Department. So where does that leave us today? Well, today, between all the different elements, including the final one, reporting, which this meeting is satisfying, I would say that all elements of our QIP are implemented with the exception of KPIs, which are in progress and will be satisfied when we meet in February and approve those final numbers. That's the end of my presentation on QAIP. If there's any final closing thoughts before I turn over to Lead Auditor Molly O'Donnell, who will discuss railcar replacement, I'll be happy to answer any final questions. Hearing none, thank you, everyone, and I'll give it over to Molly.
Good morning, Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, and General Manager Birdsong Terry. The Audit Committee and the Board have asked us to have a focus on the railcar replacement program in its entirety and to share that information. So that's the purpose of this section. We are engaged in contract compliance audit activities for the authority's contract with Siemens Mobility, Inc. This includes both the base 24-car contract as well as the 6-car and recently approved 18-car options. So we've previously completed pre-award contract compliance activities for both the base contract and the 6-car option, and we are currently engaged in pre-award contract compliance for the 18-car options. That includes, as Tony mentioned previously, our trip to Sacramento next week for the Buy America review. We are currently engaged in post-award contract compliance activities for the base contract and the 6-car option. This includes audit in the internal audit department being actively engaged in project management meetings and deliverables audits, as well as reviewing change orders and invoices. So here is our standard slide format specific to the rail car replacement program. So as I shared before, our objective is to provide ongoing contract compliance assurance on program management and procurement activities and to complete necessary Buy America reviews. Our update since our last audit committee meeting, welding on the rail car frame girders has started in Sacramento. And then infrastructure modifications are in various stages of design phase. Some are ready to advertise for the construction contract procurement, and then the port connector track has begun construction. The board requested that internal audit look at change orders close and evaluate them closely. Since our last audit committee meeting, the primary change to this change order log that's prepared by the procurement department is that change order 6, which is currently pending some final approvals. So the total change order amount pending the change order 6 approval is $144 million, but the official total change order amount to date is $31.7 million. Additionally, the project management team keeps track of potential change orders. These are items that may or may not become change orders. The primary change to this proposed change order log since our last audit committee meeting, once again, is that 18-car option there at the bottom. Internal audit also reviews payments to Siemens as part of our broader review of RTA's financial management system. So there has been $67.9 million paid as of November 21st, 2024. And this means 22% of the total contract amount plus change orders has been paid. There are several other contracts involved in this big railcar replacement program. So not all of these contracts are currently under audit, although they could become subject to audit if the internal audit department sees risks that dictate that. And these other contracts are covered on both this slide and the next slide. And these include those railcar infrastructure modification projects that are in various stages of design and construction, as I mentioned earlier. The FTA has assigned a project management oversight consultant. That project management oversight consultant helps monitor whether the railcar replacement project is on time, within budget, in conformance with design and quality criteria, in compliance with all applicable federal requirements, and constructed to approved plans and specifications. They also audited the internal audit department. So we were previously subject to review on our pre-award Buy America audit for both the base contract and the first option. We expect to be reviewed at other points of our Buy America review in the future. And that project management oversight consultant is LS Gallegos. They engage in monthly check-in meetings with our project management team and our procurement department, and internal audit management is actively engaged in those meetings. Okay. Any questions?
Molly? Molly, can you go back to the change order slide?
Yes.
Let me make sure Regional contract amount, that's for the first 24?
Yeah, that's the base contract.
31 is then subsequent orders?
The first 5 change orders, correct?
The first,
I think
the first 5 make up the 31 million, 7. And the last is the in progress, authorized by the board, is in workflow, subject to final approval by legal and project management and our general manager, CEO. Once that's done, then, the total will be 144.4.
For change orders?
Just change orders.
Yeah.
Correct.
Above the base?
Above the base.
Okay.
So Molly,
That's
can you
what I
go to
wanted
the
to
payment slide? That's got the full amount.
Yeah.
So 308.
Go ahead, Molly.
The total amount, including the original contract amount of 163 plus that 144 million in in the 6 change orders, is that 308 million in the first bullet point there.
So if you add the 163 and the 144, you get the 308 on that other slide.
That's the option for the 18 cars.
We just approved.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess, and we didn't talk about this yesterday, Tony, just getting back in, that is a commitment to purchase more rail cars. I view that slightly different than a change order. I guess, the change order is the original to track that, and there's different authority for that because the approval authority on here, we've obviously approved those rail cars, right?
If you look at I'm sorry, Mayor, if you look at the log, that is a procurement document, a contract management document, and you'll notice that where it has what's been approved by the board and what's within the general manager's authorization. So where you see BOT, that's been to the board.
Right.
And the others are subject to the general manager's authorization.
Correct, and there's a certain, I guess it might be nice if we could segregate those, because isn't there a threshold once we trigger a certain amount that's got to come back to the board, those change orders? I'd just like to keep those separate.
Yes, and that threshold is listed above? Right. Yeah, yes. And we can do a better job in our future slides. We'll work with procurement and we'll classify this differently.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mayor Kumar, I just wanted to add, Melinda from procurement. The change order log that we attach to all contracts, we're required by FTA to track all modifications. Technically, change order is a modification of the contract, which can include options.
Okay.
So it's a tracking of all monies against the contract, the original contract. And then we also, on every line item, we identify who had the authorization to approve that change order request options. So if we're exceeding the threshold, then we come back to the board. And which is why that last item, you're not seeing when Tony and Molly was talking about the last one you just approved, the option for the 18, you approved it, the board has approved it, but it hasn't been executed yet because that option contract is still routing through the process, so, because it
Gotcha.
just occurred.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that comment relative to what's
You're welcome.
required by the FTA.
Yep,
Maybe
you're
on here,
welcome.
just a summary of each amount that was a change order that was approved by the CEO, GM, and then maybe a total of what was approved by the board. So I don't want to make more work for you, but maybe just some subtotals for each. Okay.
Okay, that's fine, yeah, because we do list it as the Board of Trustees approvals on the change order, but I understand you're wanting clarification for options versus an actual change order? Is that correct?
Right, I'm just saying,
Okay.
yeah, we could have
Okay.
subtotals for each category. So we
Understand.
can easily look at those amounts as it goes forward. It'll get harder to do the math every time.
Yeah, It's a large one.
Right, right. Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, did I, back a couple slides, maybe FTA project management oversight, yeah. So you said an audit of internal audit was already conducted, and there will be another one conducted.
After each of the project management oversight, I'm sorry, Trustee Pichetti, the FTA oversight, LS Gallegos, they subcontracted to a Buy America expert. Each time that there is a Buy America audit required, will be subject to a review by that subcontractor. And there are a number of touch points throughout the continuum of the project to ensure that the contractor, Siemens, is building the cars with domestic product. So that's what this domestic content monitoring is. So again, a number of touch points at the beginning of the process, in the middle of the process, and then when we finally receive each of those rail cars. And each of those rail cars is subject to the review, not just a holistic view. It's each rail car is viewed.
And I'm guessing the results from the first one.
We're the standard. We were praised as the standard by the consultant.
Okay.
I'll brag.
And then in the future, would we hear about the results of each of those, of the auditors' audit of internal audit, of the external auditor's audit? Would we get results, or what is the process there?
So I did share the results of each of those reviews with the committee. It was prior to you joining the committee. And then in our quarterly audit report, it is part of our quarterly summary. So I can send out the specific, response.
No, I just wanted to understand the process. That's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did I answer your questions?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will turn it over to Steven Zimmerman to discuss our third quarter activities.
Thank you, Molly. So we've made some updates from the last quarterly report to our third quarter activities report. So this will go a little faster than it has in the past. In addition, we just completed 3 very successful exit conferences. However, those did not make it onto this quarterly report, so our completed projects will be a little shorter than usual. We'll have to make up for it next time when we're excited to share those results. So this is the format of the third quarter report. It's meant as a supplement to the written report, which Tony will share at a future board meeting, where we'll go over things such as completed projects, projects in progress, the results of our continuous audit program, special result requests and emerging issues, and then external audit coordination, outstanding follow-up, other projects and staff training. As we did at our last committee meeting, we have just a few graphs to show some statistics and information on the internal audit department. So we updated the 2024 audit plan coverage by audits scheduled as it was modified from the prior audit plan. So this is the new breakdown of audits according to, starting from the upper right and going around clockwise. Internal audits, contract audits, IT audits, continuous audits, external audits, advisory engagements, and the rail car audits. So this will match the distribution of audits in the audit plan. And then this is our 2024 audit plan progress for the third quarter. Really the majority of our projects at this point are in some status of planning, fieldwork, or reporting. And we're expecting many of those projects and reporting are going to be transitioning to completed very soon. And many of those projects and fieldwork will be upgrading to reporting and so on and so forth. So we are anticipating to have a strong finish in the fourth quarter as we're building up significant steam. And I think at the last quarter, the division between projects in progress and projects not started were equal. So we're making significant progress on our plan this year. So I will now turn it over to Darren Garlock, who will talk about his completed projects for the quarter.
Thank you, Stephen. Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, General Manager, CEO Birdsong Terry, good morning. So for my completed projects, I have two, and they are both construction projects. The first one that I'll discuss is the viaduct rehabilitation, and the objective for both construction projects was to provide assurance over engineering project management controls. This one specifically for the viaduct rehabilitation. And the scope is to look at the project management activities from notice to proceed through final completion. The success outcomes that this particular project ties to were community impact and financial health, and the results were satisfactory with one recommendation for management. Some management successful practices that were identified: all project management controls are in place and working effectively. Engineering division project record keeping practices are exceptional. And there was also the successful recovery of a design error and omission claim with this project. And there are no recommendations.
That was my error. I apologize, Darren.
That's okay.
On the prior slide, there were no recommendations for this audit. It was a good audit.
And then my second construction project was the Waterfront Line Bridge rehabilitation. Again, just providing assurance over engineering project management controls. And again, the same scope, looking at project management activities from notice to proceed through final completion, tying to the success outcomes of community impact and financial health. And the results were satisfactory with one recommendation for management. Again, some management successful practices. Project management controls are in place and working effectively, and the engineering division's project record keeping practices are still exceptional. And the effective inspection and the daily activity oversight. For the one recommendation, they are going to be uploading evidence of final completion once the final outstanding contractor item has been satisfied. And with that, I would like to introduce Kylie Cianciola, who's going to discuss her completed project.
Good morning, Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, CEO, General Manager Birdsong Terry, and members of Executive Management. Today, I would like to share with you the RTA travel and expense reimbursement. So our objective for this project is to review all trip reports and travel expense reimbursement for compliance with policy and procedures. Our scope is 100% of trips and expenses, and the results were satisfactory. All non-compliant results are returned back to travelers for corrections prior to processing. Now I would like to turn it over to Laura Croshaw for an explanation of our projects in process.
Thank you. Morning, Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, General Manager, CEO Birdsong Terry, and members of Executive Management. So I will take us through the next few slides, which have our projects in progress. I will pause for a little bit on each slide. If you have any questions about projects, any of us would be happy to answer. So these are projects in the planning and risk assessment phase. Next, we have the projects that are in the fieldwork phase.
Just a quick clarification. So these are projects that are currently going on that have not been closed out yet, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Are any of these new? They all look pretty normal. Are these annual or are some of these newer items that are just entered the
If
scope?
Laura would go back to the planning risk assessment, some of those would be new. I think we might have added configuration management follow-up, which we've started. And if you go to the next slide, dependent eligibility slot follow-up, and then port connector track. Those should be the new ones for this quarter.
With respect to those new ones, where are we? I know they're in progress, but where are we in the?
They're all in planning and risk assessment. So what that means is we've developed a planning memo. The auditor is doing information gathering interviews, identifying preliminary information, that kind of thing.
Got it.
Could you explain the first one on that slide for me, the dependent eligibility follow-up?
Sure. So when was it, Darren? Back in 2022 now, we did an audit of healthcare dependent eligibility. And as part of that audit, we identified that there were a number of dependents on our healthcare plan that did not have the supporting documentation required to be on the plan. That doesn't mean that they were ineligible, it just meant the documentation wasn't in place. We worked with benefits to obtain all that information, and they were able to obtain 100% of all the missing documentation. So the follow-up would be to go through and then to provide extra assurance on going back to the file room, checking those forms, making sure they're all in place and were filed correctly.
Stephen, there was one on there, and we're moving around a little bit, relative to transit ambassadors. Could you tell me a little bit more about that audit, what we were trying to achieve? And I guess the thing that caught my eye, resources are deployed strategically. You could, if whoever was doing that could elaborate a little bit on that.
Here, what we mean by resources are deployed strategically is we're really assessing the level of geographic coverage that they achieve. You wouldn't want the transit ambassadors to only send in station checks from one station. So when they're assigned to the red line, do they achieve thorough coverage throughout the red line? When they're assigned to the health line, do they achieve coverage throughout the health line versus focusing on a singular station?
And then the next couple of slides, we have projects in progress that are in reporting. So we've either finished fieldwork and haven't met with management yet, or we have completed an exit conference and are awaiting management response.
The body-worn cameras, those are uniformly used by all of our officers.
And so on this list, the audits that we just had our management or our exit conference with and our awaiting management response, or we might have received it and are still processing it, our accident and incident training discipline outcomes, identity and access management, and on the next slide, service quality bus field supervision. So those are all really, really close to being complete. And the reports will be out shortly.
Quick question, and this is probably, I don't see them in here, operations, but so if you're not sure, then just say that too. The ambassadors, they do not wear the body-worn cameras. Is that accurate? Okay. Thanks.
And then this slide details all of our Buy America projects in progress. We have 2 with Geismar, which are the line car and locomotive, 1 with Gillig, 1 with New Flyer, and the 1 with Siemens, which is the 18-car option that was just approved.
Just of note that the timing of this is that we'll complete all of these by America, the different types, the pre-award or the post-delivery must be completed before the end of January in accordance with the schedules from our fleet team.
Sorry, I got a lot of questions today. Just a quick question, Tony, I don't know, and Janet, I don't know if this is appropriate time or not. Do we want to give any kind of forewarning or update to the board about international travel that is expected? Because I know we were looking at a couple of trips coming up, especially for rail car. It might be a good time if we had any questions.
Yes, there's the required first article inspection on the Siemens railcar project where some of the railcar components will be manufactured, in a different country. And our project team is not scheduled, but will be traveling with likely our consultant to evaluate that process of manufacturing and perhaps some testing.
What regions do you anticipate traveling to?
I believe one's go ahead, Stephen.
So the areas that they're planning to travel are Warsaw, Poland. There's discussion of potentially one of them might be done in Belgium, although there might also be done in California. They're working that out. And then one is in Germany. And I remember that when we met with CISA, which is a cybersecurity infrastructure, I always forget the acronym.
It's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
They recommended that when any authority employees travel internationally, that they take proper precautions with their IT equipment, particularly when they go to somewhere like Poland. They recommend burner phones or burner laptops where you can take it out there, do your work, but then don't reconnect it to the internet when you get back home for cybersecurity purposes. So hopefully as part of the planning, that recommendation was given almost a year ago. We consider that when people go out for that travel.
Stephen, do you recall? It's like the automatic train control system and the brakes.
Yeah, the brakes are in Germany. I think it might be the automatic train control in Warsaw, and then it's the infotainment solution, Televic, in Belgium.
A question, the work that we're doing on the stations that are related to the new rail cars, is that done under, I assume it's being done under a separate contract, that's a separate project from the rail cars, correct? Is it a mic?
Yeah, Mayor Weiss, members of the committee. Yeah, and I think when you looked at the listing that was shown, I think internal audit, was breaking that down. Each of those are separate contract activities that either have come to the board or will be coming to the board. And they're all in the umbrella of the overall railcar program and in the umbrella of the overall railcar budget and schedule.
Do we use different contractors for different ones, or is there one contractor that's kind of taking?
They vary. We've used our on-call to support us at the Brook Park Yard, but we have gone out with separate solicitations. The Port Connector was a project that was awarded by the board early this year. The special track work is a long lead item, and that special track work has been manufactured, and now they've started some of the actual physical construction work at the site. We currently have some of these projects in our procurement process, and so you'll be seeing some of these contracts soon. The yard and track that's in procurement, the interior mods will be advertised shortly. I think on the next page, I'm trying to think what's, I don't think that anything else is in procurement. I think those are the two that are in procurement. The red line platform design that was awarded, I think that was awarded in October. So a lot of activity and a lot of contracts that will be coming to the board in 2025.
And we're basically on schedule with those to be done at the same time or before the rail cars?
Yeah, some of them are ahead of schedule, some are on tight schedules. And, so we do have some float in the program, and we do have some timing issues when some of the work actually has to be timed when the new cars arrive. So we're trying to get ahead of some of those so that, particularly with the platform modifications, because we want that work to be done in a manner that does not disrupt the existing rail line for months and months and months. We want it to be disrupting our service for weeks. So there's a lot going into that design contract to come up with a solution that can be manufactured staged in Cleveland and then implemented in a short duration. So more to come.
Yeah, thank you.
If there are no further questions, I'll pass it on to Randy Bowles to talk about continuous auditing.
Good morning, Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, General Manager, CEO Birdsong Terry, and guests. This is a slide that I put up pretty much every last few meetings, I believe, so I'm not going to go into detail on it. The thing I just want to point out is just the kind of continuous nature of it, how it goes all the way through it, and then with each one we do, we take a look at it and and determine, do we need to add anything to the particular continuous audit. So it's like almost like a revolving circle. Okay, this is just a slide of all the continuous audits that we do and what frequency we do them on. So I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but it's five continuous audits that we do regularly. This slide here is revenue. It shows a 12-month look back.
Randy, would you go back to that previous slide?
This one?
I think the important to note here that where traditional auditing may be sampling, okay, and taking a look at the sample and trying to project out the results, what this continuous auditing is based upon a 100% review of data and using our analytical tools and specialized software to search for any anomalies, non-compliance, so that we can follow up on. So these are the particular risks: nepotism, purchasing card, payroll, revenue collection, paratransit customer eligibility that we have computerized, where we search through those computer databases at a 100% level and search for anomalies.
All right, here we have revenue, and from what you can see in the green, everything for the 12-month look back is less than the 2% variance that we're looking for. And the bar chart, shows the breakdown of, in-station, mobile ticketing, and fare box revenue.
Go back to that slide for a second. It's less than a 2% variance. What would cause that variance, and what do we consider?
That's the fare box manufacturer's recommendation for variance.
Okay.
Okay, and we're typically below that variance, almost at zero.
Okay. I was just looking like
Thank you.
relatively what dollars.
Yeah, it's the software, recommended software provided by our fare box collection contractor that you should expect, just based on a number of factors, perhaps a 2% variance.
Thank you.
Something that might cause that is like a machine might count money going in. It might, someone might stick something in there that's not money, or just various things that could cause what the machine might count for what's actually in there. And the other types of transactions where it's comparing what's in Oracle versus what's deposited to the bank, those are 100% across the board to match. Purchasing card, it shows just the average purchase, highest purchases, the count, and the amounts, and some of the main tests that we look at. And each test doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong. It just gets flagged, and that just gives it extra scrutiny that we look at. And if we find anything that's kind of an anomaly, we sit down and discuss that with management. That's broken up into 3 different groups: FOP, non-bargaining, ATU, and we look at certain tests we do are excessive work hours, excessive overtime, terminated employees, and deductions less than 10%. And for terminated employees, recently, you know how I talked about the continuous audit, how it's always kind of evolving. One extra test that we added to terminated employees, we started tracking the date of termination to kind of get a handle on how long it's taking to get that final payment out to terminated employees. And this last slide, well, I'm not sure if it's the last, but continuous auditing, these are the current ones that we're working on. And like for nepotism, you know, it says updated, and I talked about that circular slide, how we kind of go back and look at it and make updates. I believe that one said updated last time. And it says updated again this time because after we finished it for the last month, we realized we can add something else to it. So we added that to it, and that's why it still says, you know, updated. And management feedback, I believe last month that said we were still working on it, or I think it said it was updated or something different. So now it's in a different stage. And fuel expense, that particular audit was actually just more of a traditional audit. And we decided this would actually be good to do as a continuous audit because all of the source data for this one comes from a database. And that makes it really good for continuous audit. As Tony alluded to, you can do 100% of the transactions. So in a way, there's 2 statuses for this. The audit itself is in progress. And because it was so good for a continuous audit, I decided to start the scripting process for it. So just to kind of give you an idea of what I did. For the gasoline, I looked at the gallons that our system says was delivered to RTA, and I compared that to what the vendor delivered via Oracle, what was in Oracle. And I did that from November 21st all the way to present, and there are just minor variances that when the vendor shows up and they dump the gasoline out, and our system measured, there's a slight variance. In a few cases, there were some large variances that I talked to management, and they had a reasonable explanation for it, but we're currently still looking into that and trying to fine-tune it. And the other thing that we're looking at is when they bill us, there are like 1 million different taxes on gasoline. I was surprised at how many of them there are. And some of these taxes are calculated on how many gallons they bring, some of them they deliver, some it's 90%. The amount changes based on the contract, which changes yearly, and some of the rates change every 3 months. So it's really somewhere it's possible to fat finger something or get an error in there. So we compared the rates that we calculated as what it should be versus what we were billed for, and it was 100% match. And that goes back to, I did that from March 2021 to the present. So this is something that I hope that it'll probably start doing this monthly once we finish up the audit portion of it. And I still have to do the same thing for diesel. And I believe that's my last slide, and I'll make sure. Pass it on to Andrew. Are there any questions?
No, we're good.
All right. Good morning, Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, and GMs, Birdsong Terry. In addition to all the projects in progress that we report out on, there are also a number of ongoing technology projects which may or may not be official full-sized audits. So on this list, we have our consolidated train dispatch system, which is in the final design, and the project team is actually working with the vendor to schedule the factory acceptance testing. So there will be a team believe, traveling to California and a smaller team going to Pittsburgh for the factory acceptance testing portion, making sure that the visual interfaces are working as appropriate, and then that some hardware is configured appropriately. On our EasyFare mobile ticketing, we continue to have the primary project team continues to have bi-weekly meetings with some additional one-on-one meetings with our Misabi project rep. So the current status of that project is we're still working on the validators for Tower City, so we don't have to use the mobile app as a flash pass anymore. Every fare gate will have a validator, just like every bus has a validator. And then additionally working on the account-based ticketing so we can get to that best fare for every customer. Our bid dispatch system has this. They're working on some system improvements for that to assist with the automation of tracking certain metrics. Currently, that is being looked at for absence tracking and how to appropriately track absences, and then following up on those absences with district management for training and follow up with those employees. As we continue our look at disaster recovery, we have our data center co-location project that is mostly completed. I believe we're still in the phase of procuring some additional hardware to be sent to that co-location center. Our paratransit scheduling system there are several different aspects to this project. So within the last couple months, if we recall, there were issues as far as ADA compliance with the scheduling website. That website has been updated. We're currently in the discovery phase of upgrading the current application. And then once that application upgrade is performed, they're looking towards getting an Uber-esque application, smartphone application, to work on scheduling rides for our clients. Our MIS group is diving into the world of robotic process automation. That's currently in procurement. We met with several vendors, and I believe they are working on extending the offer to the final proposed vendor. We continue working on our point of sale system for fare media at Tower City, along with various infrastructure updates across the authority. The procurement for a new learning management system broken out from our primary ERP. The MIS division is also involved in the ticket vending machine consulting project, as well as our fluid management system, which I believe was just approved by the board at the previous board meeting.
Mayor Kumar, this is Melinda. Just as an update from procurement, the robotic process automation is on the committee agenda for next Tuesday. It's coming before as a presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could, I have a question. Sure. On the Tower City validators, in the absence of the validators, what does an audit look like? I'm just trying to understand.
So in the absence of the validators, we just have the dynamic QR codes in the application. So when you activate a pass in either the transit app or our EasyFare app, the QR code itself changes every about 5 seconds, and there's a little colorful bouncing bar with the current date time that is consistently updating, that the booth attendants are meant to check that, it's dynamic, it's continuing moving, it's not a screenshot.
So are you making sure that the attendants are checking the QR codes?
So we're not currently auditing that flash pass process.
Okay.
When we rolled out the system and the flash pass was more prevalent, there was training and documentation provided to all operators and booth attendants. And so due to that training, as well as we did go out and perform validation of all the validators on the buses and flash some to the operators. And that was back when we rolled out the project in 2022. But currently there is no project for that. Next, we'll move on to our special requests and emerging issues. The first project that we worked on was the salaried non-bargaining, non-exempt compensatory time. At the end of 2023, we received a request from Human Resources as they had identified instances of unusual compensatory time earnings and requested that internal audit perform a review and validation. The scope of our audit was to perform some validation and ultimately to script the calculated and anticipated time credits and debits based on the weekly hours worked and compared to the system values between the time and attendance system Kronos and our financial management system Oracle. And all those calculations were based off of the Fair Labor Standards Act. As a result, a number of current and former employees were both identified with variances between the calculated anticipated actuals and the system values for compensatory time, and Human Resources will perform a manual validation of those variances and initiate remedies to correct those accounts. If there are no other questions on that, I will turn it over to Tony.
Thank you, Andrew. This is our last segment. This slide represents some ongoing audits at this point. We're doing an audit of the Office of Professional Standards. This is where they're doing their own internal investigations and compliance with general police policies, just for compliance. The salary non-bargaining exempt comp time, this is the result that Andrew just described. We are completing an audit of a diverted vendor payment and working with the legal and our insurance companies to recover those amounts. And then there was a change directive issued for our West 117th Rapid Station that we received a request from management to review some of the change order or change directive work there. All in progress. In terms of external audit coordination, be advised that the state auditor has decided to conduct the audit of the 2024 financial statement audit with Raj and John's group in the back. They invited me to their entrance conference this past week, and they'll be conducting some interim work very soon, and with their field work beginning likely in February, March of next year. And then the State of Ohio Department of Transportation is required by the FTA to conduct rail safety oversight program reviews. And then, as we mentioned earlier, we're working with the FTA and that project management oversight on the rail car replacement program. Status of outstanding audit follow-up, as Stephen described earlier, we will track and validate all of our recommendations to full implementation and close them out. This is one of our global audit standards. Other projects, as Stephen also mentioned, or answered Ms. Birdsong-Terry, the dependent eligibility audit for the healthcare is rounding to a close. And at this point, then now that we know that we have the employee and dependent database correct in-house, now we can take a look at how those claims are processed. So we'll be engaging a healthcare audit consultant, and we'll be looking at the past couple years worth of processing our claims in compliance with our plan design and our contract compliance. Other projects that the Internal Audit Department works on, and both in the advisory services, we certainly manage the hotline, and we're a member of a number of steering committees to share our broad knowledge and to learn about risk in the organization. This is the training that the staff received during the third quarter. As Stephen mentioned earlier, in our quality assurance review or a program, we all are required to get at least 40 hours of training each year, and we appreciate that opportunity and the budget afforded to us. And that wraps up our presentation, and we'll be happy to answer any final questions or take any comments that the committee has.
Any comments from members of the committee or CEO General Manager? Okay, great. Thank you so much for the presentation. Love the format, the ability to engage and really understand, the status of all your activities. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
If there's nothing further, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second, Pachetti.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Great job.